I want to first thank the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance for coming to Exeter, so I don't have to drive far away. The town of Exeter is really pleased to see you all, and I'm pleased to see familiar faces and faces I want to get to know. I think the event here has been planned for something for everyone, and I'm looking forward to my own events, but others that I can see. And so with that, I want to hand off to Jeannie Forrester, the Chair of the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance Board of Directors.
Good morning. Well, Julie, thank you so much for your service to the state and to your town, a selectman and a state representative. That's quite a lot. I'm Jeannie Forrester. I am the chair of the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. Happy to be here this morning with you. The Preservation Alliance moves its programs around the state to highlight local history, best practices, and preservation opportunities, and we're excited to be here in Exeter this morning with you. We are grateful to Julie and other members of the Heritage Commission and the greater Exeter community for helping us bring you all together and present this conference. We dedicate this day to the legacy of our beloved former chair, John Merkel of Exeter, who died suddenly in August, an architect who helped with the revival of the Wentworth by the Sea Hotel, Castle in the Clouds, and many other great places. He raised his kids in Exeter, and he was deeply involved here, leading the creation of the town's Heritage Commission and much, much more. We are very sad that he's not with us at the podium as planned today. However, we take solace and gain energy from the fact that multiple generations of people who got a chance to know him will carry his memories and skills with them. This gathering is very central to what the Preservation Alliance does throughout the year. Responding day to day to the calls from people like you, providing connections and educational materials and programs, getting out ahead of the critical issues and forward-looking policy work to get you the tools you need at the State House and with funders and partners. Our work has and will be accomplished with a great board, dedicated staff, and with effective partnerships with organizations and agencies, many of whom are listed in your program as organizational sponsors. Our effective activities and results are supported by memberships, annual fund, Forward at 40 campaign, the legacy gifts from people in this audience and across the state. It is also supported by New Hampshire businesses like the great ones that are helping underwrite today's event. So let's please give them all a round of applause.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Goodman, the Executive Director of the Preservation Alliance, and adding my welcome and thanks. Many of you know that it's our 40th anniversary year, and it's been wonderful to reflect on our history, where we've been, what those qualities were as we got started, and plan for how we're going forward at 40. Conferences like this one were a centerpiece of our operations in those early years. And I know today we've got some of the founders of our organization who helped with those early conferences. Martha Fuller Clark, Lynn Monroe, just to name a few. I'm sure they were organizers and panelists. There was probably a lot of typing, right? Creating those name tags and programs in those days too. We've been talking this year about how even from the beginning, there was this deep commitment to cross-disciplinary connections. So the early conferences like today, we're not just talking about preservation, but connecting to important issues like housing, community and economic development, and conservation. There was also very much of a solutions-oriented approach in those early years and still today. Something that I hear envy from other states, other organizations like ours, just missing, or there's an absence sort of in that cross-disciplinary, the collegiality and friendships, and that positive solution that seems so important to what we do and how we get things done. Another thread in our history is the investment, ideas, and networks and grants by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for the Preservation Alliance and for the whole movement. I'm about to introduce our featured speaker this morning, Dick Ober, the president and CEO of the Charitable Foundation. I know he's going to talk a little more about the cross-pollination idea, but the foundation has helped us underwrite the task force work that led to the formation of this organization 40 years ago. Take a look if you want. I've got a big copy of it today. And also, we're with us at every major juncture of growth for our organization. And you should all know they've really helped, quote unquote, fill the toolbox through the years too, with things like LCHIP. They were there at the beginning to help the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program get funded. Bricks and mortar grants, preservation easements, tax incentives, a lot of the things that the preservation has worked on in partnership with you so that we can get more done on the ground. So it feels especially wonderful and positive today that Dick Ober is here with us, and I've enjoyed working with him in his previous roles in the land conservation world at the Forest Society and Monadnock Conservancy, and so admire what he's done at the Charitable Foundation. His talk is New Hampshire's living landscape, our responsibility. Dick, it's so great that you're here with us today.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Jeannie and Jennifer, for inviting me to be with you this morning. I have to say, when Jennifer and I first started talking about, hey, we're going to have this event to mark 40 years of the Preservation Alliance, would you say a few words? I said, I'd love to. Went back and forth, and then I saw the agenda, keynote speaker. It's like, wait a minute. I didn't think that was the deal. So lower your expectations, just telling you. But I do want to just share some thoughts, some ideas, and a few stories in this theme I bring you today of citizen responsibility and living landscape. So we share an anniversary. The year that the Preservation Alliance was founded, 1985, was the year I entered New Hampshire's nonprofit sector as an employee working for the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. So this also is my last year in New Hampshire's nonprofit sector. I announced my retirement from the foundation as CEO last week. That will be effective sometime next year when they find my successor. But this is just the beginning of the Preservation Alliance, but we share that anniversary. I remember the founding of the Preservation Alliance. I remember the evolution from John Page leaving the New Hampshire Historical Society, founding Inherit New Hampshire, evolving into the Preservation Alliance in 1985. Have had so many opportunities to collaborate over the years with Jennifer and the Preservation Alliance, and many of you in this room, and some people who aren't with us anymore, and I'm going to say a word about a few of those in just a moment. So your mission to help preserve, the Preservation Alliance helps preserve historic buildings, landscapes, and communities. Yes, definitely. But there's a whole lot more to what you do. Because what you do is actually sustain two core principles that I believe have defined New Hampshire life for a very long time, and certainly the last 40 years that I've been a part of this community, and that is our commitment to, and I'm going to use these phrases a lot, our living landscape and civic responsibility, citizen responsibility. And those two things come together at the Preservation Alliance, and they come together as I reflect on where the state has been, where it is, and where we're going. So, as Jennifer was kind to say, most recently my collaboration with the Preservation Alliance and so much of the work that many of you are doing in your volunteer work and your other organizations is having the privilege to serve as the president and CEO of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for the last 15 years. And I hope I have this figure right. A staff colleague said about $2 million in grants to the Preservation Alliance over the last 40 years, which we are very proud to have played a small part in that. So there's so many people who've helped me better understand this concept of the living landscape, this blend of working lands and forests and farms and wilderness areas and scenic areas and historic buildings and historic landscapes, and how it all comes together. Far too many to name today, although I see Martha Fuller Clark in the room, I see Jim and D.B. Garvin in the room, and at this moment I want to say something about three people I miss terribly. Jeff Taylor, Van McLeod, and John Frisbee, all of whom were mentors of mine, friends of mine, and helped me understand how this state works and how we work together, especially across conservation and historic preservation. So I'm going to be quoting from what I think is my kind of tome for New Hampshire, and it's this report. It's called New Hampshire, My Responsibility. This is the report of Governor Judd Gregg's Commission on the 21st Century, and it was written and completed in 1991 after what I think was the last really comprehensive visioning exercise this state did, and that is now 35 years ago. So I'm going to start here, and this is something that I've used a lot, and this is the first page of this report, refers to the New Hampshire paradox, and it is this: people come to New Hampshire or stay in New Hampshire to be independent. We discover, paradoxically, that independence requires a community effort. The independence of New Hampshire people is legendary, but unlike any legend, it is part myth. Under the mainstream of rugged individualism, there has always been a practical current of interdependence and cooperation. As New Hampshire grows, this is 1991, remember. We had gone through 10 years as the fastest growing state in the Northeast, third fastest growing state east of the Mississippi. As New Hampshire grows, our sense of mutual dependence must become as strong as our independence, or we'll lose both. So this report ended up with two overarching recommendations. And I'm going to read those. Citizen responsibility is number one, a belief that individual citizens can and will take responsibility for our future. Second was the living landscape, a strong attachment to the environment of the state, including both its natural resources and its built environment. Simple, profound. When this report came out, the land conservation community, I was proud to be a part of it at the time. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to say one other thing. So out of this report, the many, many, many recommendations were a project called Community Cornerstones, where during those periods, 100 of New Hampshire's 234 communities, citizens got together and said, what are the 21 things we want to save for the 21st century? And the only rule is you had to be able to take a picture of it. So you couldn't say local pride, but you could have a picture of your Independence Day parade. Many, many, many of those cornerstones were historic buildings and open landscapes. Another thing that came out of this was New Hampshire civic profiles. 100 communities did these civic profiles. How strong are we? How coherent is our social and civic fabric? Are we good at solving problems and moving ahead and doing plans? Another thing that came out of this report is Leadership New Hampshire. We founded it, the foundation founded it in 1992, along with the BIA, still going strong, and of course there are many regional programs. Out of this report came LCHIP, and that's where I want to go next. In 1987, after 2 years of very intense advocacy on the part of the environmental community and the land conservation community, the state of New Hampshire created something called LCIP, Land Conservation Investment Program. And the deal was the state would put $50 million into conserving land through the purchase of land and conservation easements, and the nonprofit community led by the Forest Society would raise another $50 million in charitable gifts, but also in the value of donated land, $100 million to save 100,000 acres in 6 years. We were halfway through it when this report was produced. And that program was successful. It saved more than 100,000 acres. It spawned very vibrant regional land trusts, regional land conservation organizations throughout the state. But there was a very big missing component. It was all about land. And where was the built environment? So when this report came out, it kind of acknowledged that. And one of the recommendations, which became LCHIP, was the Land Conservation Investment Program, the one I just told you about, has provided a model of successful public-private partnership. A new effort is needed to extend our stewardship to New Hampshire's countryside more broadly conceived, including our townscapes and cityscapes. Conservation of the countryside would include the acquisition of small but critical parcels of land and assist in the protection of buildings or other structures with distinctive architectural or historical features. There is the DNA for what became LCHIP a couple of years ago, thanks to the tremendous legislative leadership of some people in this room. So why am I taking you down this memory lane? It's not because I'm starting to look back on 40 years of working in the nonprofit sector, but it's not completely unrelated to that. It's more, excuse me just for a moment. It's more because that spirit, that commitment, that dedication to citizen responsibility and conserving our living landscape, to me, that's New Hampshire. You've all heard the Margaret Mead quote. It's emblazoned on the wall at the foundation that never doubt that a small group of determined citizens can get something done, can accomplish marvels nothing else ever has. And to me, that is absolutely our state of New Hampshire. It can be frustrating in this state that there's no centralized decision making, that we have 234 separate towns, that we have the largest state legislature on the planet, that we have a weak governor office who has to report to a board of directors, basically, we call the executive council, that we only have 2 terms of governors, that we have, 103 school districts across the state for a school-age population smaller than Boston. It goes on, right? And so this can be frustrating sometimes, especially people new to New Hampshire. They say, I don't understand how this place works. But you have to acknowledge that is New Hampshire. It comes from a deep distrust of centralized authority, the fear that the king was going to come back someday, and you don't want that to happen. So, and what it means is it inspires us to realize, okay, we are going to have to get stuff done on the community level, not letting state government off the hook, but the energy is going to come from exactly the kind of work that you all do in your towns, in your volunteer work, in your professional work to take care of your communities. That's how New Hampshire works. And sometimes that creates some tensions, especially around all sorts of tensions. But I want to talk a little bit about the tension that was there between the land conservation community and the historic preservation community. Until the 1990s, we learned to work together, and I'm going to tell a couple stories. The first one is about the moose plate. So we all got together and worked together to create the moose plate to fund land and historic heritage projects, right? You all know that. Hugely successful. In the mid-90s, I was asked by the governor to co-chair the State Park Commission along with Senator Bob Odell, and we were struggling. The state park system was a mess. I was just talking with Maggie Steer about this. She was involved. State park system was the only self-funded state park system in the country. It was losing money. We had $70 million worth of deferred capital, and we were trying to figure out in the state, how do you raise money? So we came up with the brilliant idea of a license plate. Let's sell license plates, and you can buy a license plate, you can get into the state parks free. Martha Fuller Clark called me one day in that incredibly kind, soft, clear voice and said, "We have to talk." And I'll never forget, Jennifer, Martha, the meeting I think was some office in Eagle Square. Did you have an office there at some point? Okay, so Maggie was probably there. And Martha's point was, I like this, but you can't cannibalize the moose plate. People are gonna have to choose. Like, do I support LCHIP by buying a moose plate? I'm gonna buy a park plate. So we actually came up with a joint marketing venture, and you could buy both. And I was proud to get one of the first both plates. That was coming together for a solution, recognizing there could be tension, recognizing we might cannibalize each other, and move forward. The next story is a harder one for me. I found myself, Jim Garvin will remember this, I found myself on the stage of the music hall. I was at the Forest Society this is in 2001, trying to explain why the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests was going to tear down Carey Cottage on Creek Farm on Sagamore Creek in Portsmouth. And that story is way too long and complicated to spend time on, but I was like, the first time ever, I was like, I hope there's not rotten fruit in this room, because I think they're gonna start throwing them at me. And that was a moment where we at the Forest Society had a rational reason to consider tearing down this historic cottage to preserve this open space. Rational, but not holistic. Richard Candy was involved, Martha, Jim, lots of other people telling us why we shouldn't do that. And over the next 25 years or 20 years, multiple concepts. How can we balance these two things? And today, to me, Creek Farm, if you haven't been there, you gotta go. And Carey Cottage stands as a model of saying, you can do both. You can have 35 acres of open space in Portsmouth, and you can have restoration and adaptive reuse of this incredibly important historic building. Also during those years, how do we do cluster zoning? How can we have more dense development in some parts of our towns while preserving open space in others? And I was personally involved with literally hundreds and hundreds of land conservation projects that grappled with this, often resulting in the conservation of the land and the protection of historic buildings around the land. So I'm going to start wrapping up now. And we are in a period that I believe is certainly the most challenging period for the nonprofit sector I've ever seen after 40 years. And it's not only deep funding cuts. I think Jeannie and I were talking about this earlier. I think we are looking at a period where the fundamental roles of the public sector, the nonprofit sector, the higher education sector, and the business sector, our four great sectors in our society and economy, are being rewritten and reimagined almost faster than we can get our minds around. Our nonprofit sector needs to recognize that our role is changing. We need to adapt. We can't let the public sector off the hook. That's the third time I've said that, because Martha Fuller Clark is staring me in the eye right now. But we also have to recognize that the world is changing, and we need to think about how we can flex and adapt. There's so many divisions in our world today and in our communities. You feel them every day. We are in a polarized world that I am very sad about most of the time. However, I'm also an inveterate optimist, and one thing that I know brings people together across difference is identifying something we want to save at the local level and working together to do that. It's tangible, It's lasting. It brings us together for a common purpose for these communities that are our responsibility. So, yes, save special places. Yes, 7 to Save. I remember when you first came up, I think it's absolutely brilliant the way it brings people together, brings civic pride. The historic building or bridge in my community has been identified as one of the 7 to Save. Man, that gets people excited. Keep doing that. Yes, work to connect the past, the present, and the future in your historic preservation work. Yes, recognize and sustain that there's special characters in every New Hampshire community, special characters, yes, and character in every New Hampshire community that are worth sustaining. And yes, continue to talk about how sensible historic preservation and land conservation is a part of sustained economic development and opportunity. But remember, it's even more than that. Americans are feeling adrift. There's confusion between fact and fiction. We have these ultra divisions. That's why sticking to this work, even through the challenges, gives people something to ground. I see my neighbors working together for something we care about. It's tangible, I can touch it, I want to be part of that. Because that's how stuff gets done in New Hampshire. I'm going to close with a quote from the 18th century conservative military philosopher dude, Edmund Burke. Not my usual kind of jam, but Edmund Burke, my friend Bev Shadley, sitting over there, we worked together for years, might remember this was on my bulletin board, my office at one point, and the quote is this. I'm going to use his gender thing, although it's, I won't change his gender thing. No one made a bigger mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. What you're doing in your work sometimes feel like a little, but it's not. It is citizens' responsibility to sustain this living landscape that we call New Hampshire. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those, as I said down on the floor, for those amazing messages and encouragement, and for 40 really exceptional years of leadership. Thank you so much, Dick. I think it's worth more applause. I just have 2 or 3 little jobs left while we're still all in one place. Select person, Julie Gilman, wanted to say a little something about parking.
Thank you for being patient. Apparently our highway supervisor. Those of you who parked on the street.
Keep that information here.
Heard it here first. And I also was remiss in thanking my own Heritage Commission. This is one of our purposes.
I just wanted to say that we're really benefiting today from Megan Gross's excellent coordination. Yay, Megan. And hope you'll connect with her and all of our wonderful staff and board before the end of the day. Biggest pieces of cake at the reception for those who make all of those connections, and to each other. Please introduce yourself to Martha Cummings, who is the newest member of our team. Please salute Beverly Thomas, who has almost completed 20 years of exceptional service just in a few days for the Preservation Alliance. And while we're doing a personnel roundup, I have to shout out for Andrew Cushing, who is staying connected to the Preservation Alliance and is here today doing double or triple duty as usual, but is now full-time with Mascoma Valley Preservation doing tremendous, tremendous work. So cheers for Andrew. So come to enjoy the day, obviously, do the networking, get the content that we hope that you'll get, come to our reception, toast those folks and offer encouragement to this year's 7 to Save listees and to each other. And before you check your program to see where you're going next, before you work on those toasts, we're just gonna share a 6-minute video snapshot, informal snapshot of where we are with 7 to Save properties over time. This year, we nested the announcement of the newest 7 to Save in the program because the issues, the people, the property, the needs are so intertwined with conference content, of course. And we think this snapshot overview, it picks up on some of Dick's themes for sure. And I think hopefully like his keynote that he didn't know was a keynote, offers both some grounding and some uplift for the day. So here we go. Thank you to Becky Howland for the video.
There are lots of numbers in historic preservation activity. The dimensions of an old window, the cost of a building's redevelopment, the number of votes to pass a preservation-related warrant article at a town meeting, the many wonderful people in our preservation movement. 7 is the number that the Preservation Alliance came up with 2 decades ago to draw attention and resources to special places each year with our 7 to Save Endangered Properties program. Why 7? Not too many so you could dig into the threat, history, and needs of those listed each year. Not too few so you could also see the variety of trends and critical issues represented in these special places. And because it sounded good, 7 to Save. The Preservation Alliance is proud that 7 to Save listings have helped property owners and advocates draw needed attention, secure votes, and attract creative solutions and investments. We are grateful for the many people who have steered these places to success. What's been lost from the list and from our communities reminds us that there are owners who can't or won't be convinced of a preservation solution. Complex redevelopment scenarios that are made more complex by changing demographic, land use, or political issues, and delays in action that put rehabilitation costs out of reach. Some painful 7 to Save losses include the last remaining building of Noyes Academy in Canaan. This 1835 school was the first known upper-level co-ed school in the U.S. to admit African Americans. And although it was a short-lived social experiment, it launched the careers of several prominent Black leaders of the time. UNH's Depression-era pool, where generations of Durham children learned to swim, and families forged strong community bonds. The rare prairie-style manager's house at the National Register-eligible VA campus in Manchester. There are also some 7 to Save properties that seem stuck. Examples include the Balsams in Dixville Notch, which has already lost some of its secondary buildings. A North Country resource connected to another grand hotel, the print shop at the Mount Washington Hotel, that still contains its 19th century presses and cases of type used to print hotel menus, golf scorecards, and more. 2 major steel truss bridges in Franklin, at a key gateway and near the new Whitewater course. The Moultonborough Grange that continues to deteriorate. Losses represent missed opportunities. These places not only connect us to fascinating stories and events from the past, but also offer new or renewed economic opportunities as places to live, work, and gather. Their rehabilitation and reuse would help conserve resources, maintain or enhance community identity and character, and catalyze additional environmentally healthy investment. At the heart of the success stories and saved status are inspiring examples of tremendous leadership, generous donors and investors, bold leaps of faith, and creative advocacy alignments. Here are just 7 of a nearly 150 property portfolio. The shuttered Hilltop School in Somersworth now houses families in a residential neighborhood that's an easy walk to downtown. The Colonial Theater in Laconia now hosts top-notch entertainment, along with retail and residential spaces that have contributed to a downtown renaissance. Nashua's Coptic Orthodox Church leveraged their 7 to Save listing to secure national grant support to care for their marble-clad building that had previously been home to a French-Canadian congregation. The restored Milford Bandstand is in use again after years of neglect and talk of demolition. Revival of the Parker Noise Block, once an epicenter of pharmaceutical manufacturing where the sugar-coated pill was invented, as a retail and housing anchor for the Main Street of Lancaster. The Grafton Center Meeting House is on its way to a major rehabilitation and reuse as a market and community hub after a fire and years of deterioration made it seem nearly unsalvageable. The Jackson Town Hall has been moved away from its former flood-prone location to a safer site for continued use as the Historical Society's vibrant museum. 40 years ago, attorney Carolyn Baldwin described the reasons that she and others formed the nonprofit that is now the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. Her words ring as true today as they did in 1985. New Hampshire's built landscape is an essential component of the resources for which we are responsible for present and future generations. Our villages, towns, and cities are every much as vital a part of the New Hampshire environment as are our mountains, lakes, rivers, clean air, forests, and farms. As the Preservation Alliance turns 40 and the 7 to Save program reaches its 20th year next year, we continue to build on that vision and commitment, and it's going to take many voices and strong alliances to succeed. We ask for your ideas about places that need attention and the trends and forces that threaten them. We ask for your commitment to help save places in need, and especially this year's list and those that are languishing on past lists. And we encourage you to champion the many other special places that aren't on the list and that matter to you. Preservation is good for our communities, good for the economy, and good for the soul of New Hampshire.